In this video, I'm going to talk about what made me decide to pursue a diagnosis, the process of trying to get a diagnosis, the good things, the bad things, the rough patches, the process of getting a diagnosis, i.e. how I got myself diagnosed. And I'll go through all the steps. I promise I won't gatekeep. And then 4, what next? What I've learned, what I intend to do with the information, how things have been different thus far. Hey y'all, hope you're having a beautiful day. It is Billy here, coming to talk about something that was really important to me because I feel like there's actually a lot of gatekeeping in the autistic community. And I'm here to share my journey because from the moment that I had curiosities about being tested into the moment that I did, there had to have been about a span of 10 years, possibly 9. And I feel like if there's something that we're curious about finding out, it shouldn't take that long. For instance, if we found a mass somewhere on our body, we would definitely not be okay waiting 9 or 10 years to find out more information about it. However, autism is something that's typically diagnosed in childhood, and there aren't actually a lot of studies that help diagnosing adults with autism. And even more so, the studies that help them diagnose people with autism typically study white male boys. And so when you add the factor of being an adult, plus the factor of being a woman, and then the factor of being a person of color, a lot of the times it makes it 10 times more difficult. Also, and this is just my personal feelings on it, it may not be backed by anything other than my feelings, but I feel like us being adults makes it feel for institutions that our diagnosis isn't a priority. The first time, and why I decided to get a diagnosis. The first time that I actually thought about getting a diagnosis, it was because of a little sly comment from my mom. If I'm being completely honest with you, and Mom, I know that you're probably watching this. I feel like we had this conversation and you remember this moment. But she was leaving the door, leaving the house, she was leaving the house with one of my siblings, and we had a little tiff, as we always do. And as she leaves, she goes, well, I think she may be a little autistic. You know, they weren't thinking about that in the 90s. And I was like, I have been thinking about it ever since. Because legitimately, I'm like, okay, I was born in the 90s where these conversations weren't as much of a topic. It was a little bit more taboo, even more so in the Black community. So it makes sense that if I were, it wouldn't be something I would know or my family would know. Also, to be honest with you, my family is not the kind of family that's okay with, therapy issues, and now that we're moving in 2026, they are becoming a little bit more open to the concept of it. But my family is not that kind of family. And I feel like a lot of Black people may agree, and maybe some other cultures. I'm just speaking of Black culture because I'm Black. I'm Black. So that was the first time that it came into my mind. It made sense to me to then take to the internet and look up how to get diagnosed with autism. And then I learned that, okay, it's mainly for children. So how to get diagnosed with autism as an adult. Okay. And so then I did that and found something like the National Autism Association. I'm going to pull up the email that I received from them so that you can see it. I'm putting my hands here, but I'm new to the YouTube, so who knows if I'll be able to add it here. And basically, they told me that their organization does not accept any form of insurance, and that if I wanted to get diagnosed through them, that it would be $5,000. I was like, okay, that's cool. I'm okay how I am, because after all, I'm in my 20s, and if I have it, I done been had it. It's okay. Because $5,000 is wild. And then I took some other channels of finding other organizations, again, very difficult. A lot of the places I reached out to were we specifically work with children. So if you're an adult, unfortunately, we don't have anybody that covers that. I scheduled different therapy appointments, and a lot of the time they were like, oh, well, I specialize in people who have been diagnosed, but I myself cannot do a diagnosis. And the people who can don't work for us. Or be an organization and say that the people who are specialized and are able to do a diagnosis aren't available anytime soon. So this happened over the course of years. And again, I heard the 5,000 thing and I was like, I'm no pressure. I'm okay to not rush into this, or just not. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Then I get an ad for something called Prosper Health. I think it was via the social medias. But let me pause here, because one thing I did skip is, aside from the comment from my mother, what made me decide to pursue this as a whole. And for me, it made sense because I feel like I've done really good integrating myself in social settings, but that hasn't always been the case. My entire life, I've always missed like the subtle social cues, subtle flirting, gonna go over my head, subtle jokes, even when like I'm the butt of the joke, over my head. The certain fixations I had on certain things, the difficulty picking up, learning certain things. There was a period in middle school where I just genuinely was really terrible at being able to pick up social cues in order to maintain relationships. People have often called me blunt or overly honest, and it's never my intention to be that. I just don't always understand how to communicate any other way. I feel like if I feel something or if I think something, I should say it as is, and I do. And I don't always understand how that can rub people the wrong way or how that is outside of social norms. I'm never very great at gray areas. Things tend to be black and white, and that's just processing wise. You know, there are certain rules, like if the rule is don't lie, this has always caught me up. You know, we learn as people that we're not supposed to lie. But then if we are, you know, if somebody tells us something in confidence and then another person that's also close to us asks us about it, I don't know. I don't want to lie, especially to this person that I care about, but I don't want to tell their secret. And I get stuck in the weird gray area of it. And what I've learned over the course of life is just I avoid the topic altogether to avoid lying or releasing somebody's secrets. Or sometimes I'll just be like, look, please, I'm not the person to be talking with about this. But the gray areas are the things that really confuse me. Or like at work, when people are like, well, we want to make sure that you communicate where you are if you're not on site. And then I'll communicate that, and they'll be like, oh, well, you don't have to communicate that much, just communicate sometimes. And my brain's like, okay, but then there's gonna be a time where it's not okay, but if I don't communicate, but you do want me to communicate, those things I've never been so great at. Also, the way that I can become fixated or super into a thing that I'm doing or learning about. And so just in all the different skills and tools that I have. And so when my mother made that comment, realized that that may actually help me understand a lot of the things that are a little odd and off. I'm grateful that these things have just made me quirky, half in part because I went to an art school, to Ellington School of the Arts. So since high school, I've been in artistic spaces, which helps because we're all a little weird. I think everybody's a little weird, but art is even more so. But it just made me realize that this may actually make a lot of sense in my processing. Since being diagnosed, I have realized even more falls into the category of autism or being on the spectrum than I realized. Now, Prosper Health. The first time it got recommended to me, I was on my Actors Equity insurance. I got the ad and I was like, that's very great. They said they took my insurance. So then I had to type in my location. And based on the location I was at, they actually didn't accept my insurance in that network, I think is what they called it. Like your area doesn't actually accept the insurance. And so I tried to fiddle around and because I was in DC, and so I tried to fiddle around and see if Maryland does or Virginia does. But at the end of the day, I was a DC resident. I didn't know how to finagle the system. And you're not supposed to finagle the system anyway. So I didn't end up doing it that time around. But I did sign up for it, put my email in, the whole nine. Flash forward about 2 or 3 years later, I get an email and it says, hey, we just want to loop back around. Do you still want to get assessed? And I then worked for a different company, put in my information, put in a location, and now in Ohio. And it said, not only does it cover it, but it also covers it in my area and the rate's affordable. With my insurance, I think my insurance at the time was United Healthcare, again, placed in Ohio. And the assessment fee was $150, but that's broken down per session with the understanding that there's going to be 3 different sessions, 2 video assessments, and then 1 that is a meeting to go over your assessment. So those are the 3 things that they said, and they break it down in 50. Now, granted, your insurance may be different. Your insurance may cover $30 of it, or your insurance may make the price $30, $20, or $8. It all varies, but just telling you the process that I went through Prosper Health. And to clarify, it's not as simple as video meetings. I did end up having 4 sessions. I paid for 3 because 1 was like an extension of the second session when we realized we were running out of time. And so for those 4 sessions, they were 90 minutes long each. And I think maybe the third one was like 60 minutes. But they were 90 minutes each session, and they were $50 per session. The third one, like I said, was free because it was a follow-up session. What I will say is that the time is definitely truncated. The therapist was very nice, but she also made it very clear that we were on a time limit and that she wasn't intending to be rude, and created a really cool, clear system so she could know if she received all the information she needed and I didn't have to continue, which is great for my mind because I talk a lot. Not because I like hearing the sound of my own voice, but because I feel like I'd rather say more up front so you can understand the whole scope of the situation than say less and then have to double back and go explain it again. And so I really love that. She would just raise her hand because we were, again, via Zoom. And so I knew that that was my cue to she had enough information and to move on. Again, she was very kind about it, but it was a system to let me know that I was saying enough. On top of this, prior to the first session, I had to fill out an assessment that had quite a few questions on it. I also had to send a questionnaire for 2 people to fill out. One person was supposed to be a family member that knew you since the age of 5. And then the second one was supposed to be somebody who you feel knows you the best. I feel like this is also a long video, but I will continue and possibly break this down in different segments.